An independent analysis of European defense capabilities and strategic policy.
The void left in the fleet structure by the loss of the Helge Ingstad in 2018 was never merely a matter of a missing hull. Rather, it was the first fracture in a fragile equilibrium, an equilibrium between ambitious maritime commitments and the finite resources of a small state. As the Norwegian Ministry of Defense navigates the early phases of its new long-term defense plan, the strategic conversation has shifted. It has moved from an optimistic regeneration of the surface fleet to a stark confrontation with fiscal and industrial reality. Recent signals indicating a potential reduction in the future frigate acquisition program, moving from a planned 5 or 6 vessels down to a probable 3 or 4, suggest that the Royal Norwegian Navy is encountering a structural paradox, a paradox common to modern medium powers. The ambition to field Tier 1 naval capabilities is increasingly at odds with the economic capacity to generate sufficient mass. Mass that is required to make those capabilities operationally relevant across the vast littoral and blue water zones of the High North. This emerging dilemma is not occurring in a vacuum. It is inextricably linked to the broader capitalization of the Norwegian armed forces, specifically the underwater domain. The concurrent procurement of the Type 212CD submarines, a joint endeavor with Germany, serves as a financial gravity well, one that distorts the budgetary landscape for surface combatants, with reports suggesting cost escalations approaching 15% within the submarine program. Due to supply chain volatility and raw material inflation, the capital expenditure buffer originally envisaged for the new frigates is being eroded. Consequently, the decision space for the surface fleet is contracting. This financial compression highlights a critical trade-off in modern defense planning, where the prioritization of strategic stealth and underwater deterrence appears to be cannibalizing the budget required for surface presence and visibility. From an operational standpoint, the reduction in hull numbers introduces a severe constraint, a constraint on availability. A fleet of 3 or 4 high-end frigates does not translate to 3 or 4 deployable assets. When accounting for the cycle of maintenance, training, and transit, a 4-ship force typically generates only 1, or perhaps intermittently 2, vessels ready for immediate high-intensity operations. In the context of Norway's strategic geography, which requires simultaneous monitoring of the Barents Sea and the protection of energy infrastructure in the North Sea, such a low-density force structure implies a shift in doctrine. It suggests that Norway may be forced to abandon the concept of continuous, independent national presence in favor of a pulse capability, where high-end assets are surged only during crises, leaving routine monitoring to the Coast Guard or relying on the persistent presence of allied naval forces. The preference for sophisticated designs, such as the British Type 26 or the American Constellation-class, further exacerbates this tension between quality and quantity. These platforms represent the pinnacle of anti-submarine warfare technology, designed to integrate seamlessly into a U.S. or NATO carrier strike group and hunt the most advanced nuclear submarines. However, the unit cost of such vessels, often exceeding $1.5 billion when fully equipped and supported, clashes with the weakening purchasing power of the Norwegian krone. By aiming for a platform that maximizes interoperability and survivability in a peer conflict, the procurement strategy risks creating a fleet that is technically superior, but numerically insufficient to cover the operational theater. This reflects a wider systemic tendency in Western defense planning to prioritize platform survivability and multi-role capability over the simpler metric of hulls in the water, a preference that becomes distinctively problematic when the theater of operations is as geographically dispersed as the Norwegian coast. Industrial considerations add another layer of complexity to this calculation. While shipyards in South Korea offer technically competent platforms like the FFX Batch 3 or KDDX at a significantly lower price point, and with faster delivery timelines, the political economy of European defense integration creates a high barrier to such options. The imperative to maintain industrial cohesion with key allies, particularly the United Kingdom and the United States, places a premium on procuring Western designs. This industrial alignment serves a dual purpose as a diplomatic insurance policy, theoretically guaranteeing Allied support in a crisis. Yet, in practice, it binds Norwegian procurement to the inflated cost structures and production delays currently plaguing Western naval shipyards. The decision to potentially forego cheaper, faster solutions in favor of Western alignment underscores that for Norway, defense procurement is as much a tool of alliance management as it is a method of force generation. Furthermore, the discussion regarding hull numbers often overlooks a critical variable: human capital. The Royal Norwegian Navy, like many of its NATO counterparts, is facing a deepening retention and recruitment crisis for technical personnel. Modern frigates are systems of systems, requiring highly specialized crews that take years to train. A reduction in the number of planned frigates might therefore be an acknowledgement of demographic reality, as much as a budgetary concession. A smaller, highly automated fleet aligns better with the available labor pool than a larger force that cannot be effectively manned. However, this acceptance of a smaller force structure creates a feedback loop, where the lack of billets and sea time opportunities can further stifle the development of the next generation of naval leadership. In structural terms, the trajectory of the frigate program indicates a potential shift in the Norwegian concept of operations toward a niche contribution model. Rather than attempting to maintain a balanced fleet capable of independent sea control, a reduced force of ultra-modern frigates would likely function primarily as specialized anti-submarine warfare nodes within a larger NATO construct. This evolution implies a subtle transfer of risk, and by accepting a lower volume of national assets, Oslo effectively bets that the alliance framework will hold firm, and that Allied assets will fill the gaps in maritime situational awareness. It represents a move away from the redundancy and resilience provided by numbers, placing absolute faith in the technological superiority of individual platforms and the political solidity of the alliance. Ultimately, the unfolding recalibration of the frigate program reveals the hard limits, the limits of what a nation of Norway's size can sustain in an era of hyperinflation in defense technology. The choice between a larger number of adequate vessels and a handful of exquisite platforms is rarely a purely military one. It is defined by the intersection of industrial policy, alliance reliance, and fiscal discipline. If the fleet size is indeed capped at 3 or 4 hulls, it will signify that the Norwegian defense establishment has prioritized the depth of capability and integration with key allies over the breadth of sovereign presence. This creates a strategic vulnerability, where the physical capacity to patrol, monitor, and enforce sovereignty is spread perilously thin, relying on the assumption that technological quality can substitute for the persistent reality of physical presence at sea.